that. Any issues with accessing anything on the canvas? Started. I know one or two of you emailed me about your books not being in yet. If that's still the case, keep letting me know. I will send you. I'll scan and send you copies of the assigned readings until those get in. So that way you're not falling behind. All right. Any other issues or questions so far? Mm-hmm. Well, so we start, of course, with the question of what is morality? What do we mean when we talk about or speak about morality? Starting off right now, what might you say would be your understanding of what morality is? I want to offer an opinion. Right thing to do. Conscious thing to do. Yeah. It's good. Yeah.
Ideal principles to live by.
Ideal principles to live by. Good. Others? Nobody thinks got anything better or is equal? Good points, good ways to think about it. In looking at it specifically from a Catholic perspective, that the Catholic perspective looks at it in regards as weighing or referring to acts, and to weighing their moral value. In other words, to say whether an action is good or whether an action is evil. What is this focus on acts, though? It is a focus on this because we as human creatures, as human beings, are able to act in a way that is not 100% natural. What do I mean by that? We don't act purely on instinct. Let's be honest, was it your instinct to get up this early and to come to class? Probably not. Not even mine right now. Is it your instinct to really just sit here for 50 minutes listening to someone? No, some of you probably are more active beings and like to be out and about doing something rather than sitting here and listening and taking notes. We as human beings, as human creatures, have the ability to act in a way to do that because we have freedom. Do we make moral judgments on whether people breathe or not? Or let me say, do we do it on how they breathe? No, because they do that almost involuntarily, right? We do it on those things that they choose to do freely. Because no one has necessarily forced them or imposed it upon them. Being creatures endowed with freedom means that we have the responsibility to judge what to do with that freedom, as we will talk about later on. Now, our author looks at, in looking at morality and opening up morality, identifies kind of two modes of defining morality, as in weighing upon acts and judging them to whether to be good or evil. Good as in leading one to God, to holiness; evil leading one away from God, away from holiness, away from goodness, away from what we're supposed to be. These two modes of defining morality, these two modes, first of all, the first one is morality being descriptive. Morality in the descriptive mode is an identifiable way of living one's own life. So you could say, in a sense, this is the rather subjective. What do I need to do? What is important to me? What is it that I must choose? Why? Because we normally start with ourselves. And that is not a selfish thing necessarily. But since we are the ones that influence ourselves the most and are influenced by ourselves the most, we have to decide for ourselves, to judge for ourselves. What is good, what is evil, what needs to be done, what needs to not be done. At the same time, morality can be defined in a very normative sense. Going beyond myself, beyond the individual, how is it everyone should conduct themselves? How is it everyone should live their lives? What I do, perhaps in my specific task as a priest, as a professor, may not be the same that you need to do. But there are some places and there are some situations and there are some ways where things apply to all of us. Should all of us obey the speed limit? Should all of us be buckled in? Should all of us be staying inside the right lines in the right lanes while driving down the highway? Or should that be something that, I decide for myself? So morality can have these two modes, and it can apply individually, but it can also apply communally, societally. Because our actions do not stay just with ourselves. They affect others. How is it, though, that we formulate our understanding of morality? How is it that we begin to see why it is we should act in this way, to do what we need to do? There's an old adage in Catholic tradition: lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi. The law of praying is the law of believing, is the law of living. What you believe is most important, what you worship or what you prioritize, shows in how you live things out. No matter what you start bringing into all of this, it reflects in how you conduct yourselves. There is truth to the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover. There also is truth that there's a lot to be known from the cover. We can reveal a lot of ourselves based on how we conduct ourselves, what we do, what we don't do. But in looking at morality, in looking at understanding all of this, why is it that we observe morality? Why do we care, or even one might argue, why do we obsess about it? We are concerned ultimately with doing what we feel is good and right. We have that innate sense within us, right? But why should we observe these things, though? And there are two classical perspectives on that. On why should we observe morality, or why should we practice it? No matter what morality, why should we practice it? Why should we observe it? And this comes to us, actually, a good example comes from classical philosophy of saying this. One of the great dialogues of Plato. The first view of why morality should be observed is morality as an obligation. In this perspective of morality as an obligation, it is seen that the ideal life that we want, we desire, is to get whatever we want. Doesn't matter what the moral value of that is, whatever our ideal life is, getting what we want. So that's what we're striving for, first of all. And of course, on the opposite end, the worst life that we can have is for others to get what they want from us. That they impose their will and they get what they want from us. It's fine for us to do that to others, but we don't want it done to ourselves. So there's a problem there, of course. How is it I can get what I want without necessarily others words escape me. How can I get what I want without being used by others? I'll use that word. How is it I can do that? Well, it requires compromise. The argument with the perspective of morality as an obligation is that it is something rather imposed on people to kind of keep each other in check. The classic sort of checks and balances system the Constitution is supposed to have. So then, individuals and societies, in a collective sense, will compromise so that as much as possible, neither anyone does nor suffers injustice. So in other words, you may not achieve the full ideal life that you want, that you desire, but at the same time, you are not suffering under that worst life that you can imagine. It's kind of somewhere in between. In the dialogues of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, writing about using his mentor Socrates, he has an opponent of Socrates talk about this perspective and talk about it in a very interesting story you should have seen in your text. Ring of Gyges. What happens in this story is that this farmer in Gyges finds a ring, nice fancy little ring. Looks nice, very nice. He puts it on, seems to fit. But then he realizes it makes him invisible. No one can see Gyges when he wears it. So he begins to use this ring to begin to acquire fame and fortune for himself, eventually being able to rise in power and fame. Socrates' opponent, Glaucon, uses this to say, when one when one is free of the knowledge of others, if no one can know that you're doing it, one then loses one's perspective of the morality of obligation. You begin to do what you want, right? If there are no consequences, right? The classic story of the Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, repeated ad nauseum, right? If I can't see you doing it, no one can hold you responsible in any way, then what is the point of continuing to observe morality? You can have what you want. A modern example, perhaps, the nice great gauntlet of Thanos, right? Do whatever you want. You have all the power stones all lined up. Make a snap and do what you will. Who can stop you? Who can force themselves on you? However, in this dialogue, our main character, Socrates as it were, counters with a perspective of what morality is supposed to be, what he argues it should be. Not one of obligation, not one of just doing what needs to be done in order to keep the peace or to, at a minimum, avoid suffering. Rather, morality as a pursuit of happiness. What Socrates argues is that the ideal life is not getting whatever you want. Rather, the ideal life is living the virtuous life. A life habitually oriented towards the good. Which, of course, can mean that, and often does mean, that you look beyond yourself towards others. And hence, this happiness that is being pursued, that is desired, can only actually be found when one practices morality. So as to say, it's not getting whatever you want. It is pursuing an objective goal. Which is, well, I desire this, so I get this. Or, well, I want this. That happiness is only found by practicing morality, and in particular practicing those virtues of morality. So Socrates argued that if the virtuous man had found the ring of Gyges, it would not have changed him. It would not have made anything different in his life. Because he's already happy, because he has found those, he is living those virtues. These are the two perspectives that often color why we approach morality. We either do it out of obligation because we don't want to be punished, we don't want to be called out, we don't want to suffer. Or we do it because we do find our happiness in doing it. We find a deep joy of living in that way. This perspective can be found in every sort of morality. Very much so, even Christian morality. You'll hear those. It's like, oh, well, God says I have to love them, so I'm going to try to love them. Or, well, if God didn't forbid it, I'd do it. That's a morality of obligation. As well, I have to do this because that's what's been kind of put on me. These are the boundary walls, as it were. The one who sees them as the path to happiness, though, is happy to receive them and to live them out. Even if it calls for giving up of things or giving up of desires that one has. Every human person lives by some form of morality. No matter what they believe, no matter what they think, there is some formulation of their morality. More often than not, coming down to these two perspectives. Do I cooperate just to get by, or to use this as much as possible to get what I want, or do I pursue happiness? Of course, we're not talking about those who rip the rules apart. So what has informed our morality up to this point? What has been our sources of morality? Can you name me one source of your morality right now? Why you act or operate the way that you do? Yeah?
Just laws.
Laws? So, government? Right? We have a whole legal system that produces laws, what to do and not to do, right? How to drive, how to operate a business, things like that. Yes? Tradition, right? Where's the very first source of tradition? What's that?
Religious beliefs.
Thinking a little bit more personally, I guess. What's the first way we receive any sort of tradition? Family, yeah. Above all, of course, parents, right? Not just parents, of course, our whole family. Right? We learn what to do first and foremost from our parents. The first teachers that we have of anything are our parents. We learn everything from them. Much of the ways that we speak, much of the ways that we conduct ourselves come to us because of our parents, because of our families. That's kind of the first way that tradition is passed on to us. What are some other ways? Yes?
School.
Right. What's the next way? Right. Education. Those who have been working with you for these past 15-ish years or so, however long you've been in education. You'd be like me and be a lifer, but that's a different story. Right? We are influenced by our teachers positively and negatively. A teacher who's a good example or who we look up to, a teacher that we don't like, gives us all these terrible assignments or makes us do all this stuff or is just mean to us, right? We're very much influenced by them. What else? Yeah?
Our peers.
Yeah, peers. Friends, peers, those around us. The company that we keep influences our morality as well? Others?
Media.
Media, right, very much. Culture. Being very much a visual culture anymore versus more of a reading culture, and especially given the prominence of the internet, social media, and everything, we are greatly influenced. You can either say positively or negative, you could say both. We are greatly influenced by the media. Not just necessarily news, but the shows, the things that we see, that we watch. Others.
Religious beliefs.
Yes, very much so. Kind of a part of that tradition, but kind of bigger than that. Religion, or we could say belief in general. Whether one has a religion or not. Yeah.
Experience.
Oh yeah, experience. Absolutely. Not only what others do upon it, what happens to us, right? We may learn that we shouldn't do these things because things happen to us, right? Either we learn from our parents that we don't stick a fork into the electric outlet, or we do it ourselves. And we're given a nice surprise and go, oh, I'm never going to do that again, right? Any others? Yeah.
People like outside the family that are role models, like educators. Not really like educators, but like I'm thinking more in terms of like an older mentor or something like that, like someone who helps with
Okay. Yeah.
personal growth.
I say mentors, we'll phrase it that way. Yeah. Be those in our community that are not necessarily family, but are still close to us. You know, especially those of us who grow up in small communities. There's a tighter knit bond, so there's a lot a lot more perhaps experience to be able to be had. Any others? I think that rounds it out pretty well. Yeah. So, all of these have influenced our morality up to this point. Help to shape it, help to give it its foundation, help to make it kind of where it is. But being responsible, free adults that we are more able now to shape our own morality and also even to begin to influence others. Though we may have done that already to some extent. As you reflect on it, in looking at your what's it called? In that first writing assignment I gave you, reflecting on your morality, reflect on some of those influences, positive and negative, that have made what you think is all of that. Where is it? How is it that you have come to where you are now in your understanding, your ideas, your beliefs, even as it were, on morality? It's important to understand where we come from, what we're building on, before we can begin to build further. If the foundation is on solid rock, then one is able to build well. If it's on sand, it will crumble. Right? So we said before, we talking about this perspective of obligation, happiness, talking about that morality. What is it concerned with? Judging whether they're good or evil. That question, though, what do they mean? How do we define them? We can say morality is concerned with that, judging, weighing, ruling, whether these actions are good or evil. But what are the criteria? We must formulate that. What are the criteria for the goodness or the evilness of actions? To look at these from the Catholic perspective, good is that which, of course, leads, directs, or comes from God. In English, that works far better than most other languages. Anything that is good is ultimately leading us in the pursuit of, or the desire or finding, God. We will talk later about looking at perspectives, understandings, things like that. Overall, even understanding the greater picture behind Christian morality. But for now, that basis of what has been revealed by God that leads us to Him. Why? Because in Him, in God, is found our ultimate happiness. We believe. One cannot be happier than that. How will be seen next class. Whereas that which is evil goes away from God. It separates us, it divides us, it corrupts us. Good leads us to God, evil leads us away and separates us. If God is meant to be our ultimate happiness, then we pursue all those things that lead us to God, directly or indirectly. It's not just necessarily, especially in the government, it's not just attending church. It's the totality of life. Morality concerns every aspect of life. It is not just an intellectual activity. It is a very practical science as well. For example, how we conduct ourselves here at university. How we take notes, how we study, how we talk with others. So based on what we are doing in all of this. Are we doing this just out of obligation? Well, my parents told me, I need to get a job and all that. This is how I get a job, so, fill it out. Check, 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 check. Or are we doing this because this is leading us, this is the path, the direction that gains us happiness? Now, of course, many in these positions, looking at things, judging whether they are done out of obligation or done out of happiness, try to say, well, I'm doing one or the other. But more often than not, what we do in observing morality is that we can often be observing a compromise. We may desire that which leads to my happiness, that which leads to my joy. But we may compromise with it and just defer to others. Well, this authority tells me to do that, or, I really can't do that because I'm not allowed to. Morality is not just merely obedience. If it was as simple as that, we'd all do it. It is concerned with the goal, with the end. We're all pursuing something. Most of us would probably say we're pursuing that happiness. What is that happiness? Remains yet to be understood, perhaps, at least in this class. And yet, we strive to understand how to be able to do that. Most of you, this is probably a lot of this is probably very new to be done. You've only been doing it maybe for the last year or two, or maybe less, since the past year has been a wash. Having all of this to inform you, to shape you, building off of that, or wanting to cut out your own path, to shape your own destiny for yourself, whichever way. But morality is the only way it will happen. Why? Because we always need a plan of operation. Nothing happens randomly, does it? Did you enroll in this class randomly, in the sense that it was just, the registrar just spun a wheel? It's like, oh, you're in this class now. No, someone probably said, this is the direction you need to go. Our lives are not normally random. Randomness can happen. But even at that if we are well-founded in our morality, we can handle that randomness well. How well did you handle the great randomness that was last spring? How many think they handled it well? Just on your own opinion. I'm not saying whether you did or didn't. A couple of you. How many didn't? All right? Part of that experience, maybe. Understanding how we are under fire. You learn a lot about somebody when they're under a stressful situation. A lot of truths start coming out about what they are and what they think and how they do. Might be something to look into for yourselves and your own perspectives and your own understanding. How did I handle it? How did I understand that? Now, of course, in looking and understanding this from the specifically Catholic and the Christian perspective, the one in whom all these things are rooted is the one who talks about this the most and helps with this the most. Jesus. Who in his preaching and in his teaching never calls people just to obey. In the sense of just do what I say. In that sense, he's a great teacher. He draws people to himself, draws them to his message. We'll see more about that message in looking at it, because it's in looking later in this class, because it's important to understand that. But no matter what your background or your foundation or your understanding, You need to understand for yourself what is at the root of your morality. Another reason I want you to do that, to really think that for yourself. To get at the root, to get at the heart of that. What is it that I really believe? What is it that I really think? Do I just check the boxes? Am I just compromising? Something in between? Is there something that I should avoid or something I should pursue? For good is that which we should pursue. Evil is that which we should avoid. Almost everybody agrees with that. The issue is defining what should be pursued, what should be avoided. We are filled with the ability to act, to choose, to do and not to do. The classic line from Uncle Ben in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Each one of us has immense power, immense ability. Though it may not make us famous or important, each one of us still has the ability to do, to act, to be, in ourselves and with others. But if we don't know the direction we're going, how do we know what we're trying to reach? How often is we get into the cycle, we just act, we keep doing, we keep observing, we keep doing all of these things, right? Doing the classes, and all of that. You, especially at this point, at this time in your life, this is the time for understanding your direction. Where are you going from here? Finding the path on the map. But if you want to do any of that, it's not just the pursuit, it's everything that must lead up to it. Right? Ostensibly, you want to have something worthwhile to come out of this education, right? An opportunity to get a job, right? For pretty much every one of you. There's no promise that it's there. That we hand you the diploma and here you go. Here's your job offer. It's going to take more than that education to get that, right? To pursue that. It's the same with life. Your happiness is not just handed to you, given to you. It's something often that we have to find and then acquire. Now, we can either see it as just something that we have to corral for the sake of others, or something that is actually pursued in conjunction with others. Yes, we live in a society. No man is an island. So then no matter what your sources have been, bring them to the table, bring them to all of this. But they must be directed towards that which should be pursued. Towards that which we all really want. Happiness, right? If it's not leading to your happiness, why are you doing it? So, thoughts, comments, ideas? Nothing? Nathan, nada? So maybe answer that kind of question for yourself of, in your reflection paper, which would you say you've done more? Have you been more of obligation, or have you been more of happiness, or maybe even just more of compromise? Maybe think for yourself, what is your happiness as it stands right now? What is it that you want? What is it that you want the most? What will satisfy you? There might be something in taking this class to begin to pursue, using these principles to begin to pursue. What do you say is good? What do you say is evil? Remember, it's your reflection. Don't tell me what I want to hear. You might not necessarily know what I want to hear at this point. So don't butter me up. Be honest. You're not going to offend me. You're not going to hurt me. I've heard much worse. Okay? We'll close it up there for the day. For Friday, read up on chapter 2 to begin to see how we begin to judge, to say how things are good and evil, how it is we are free, why we are free. What is freedom? What does all of that mean? What is it all towards? Maybe even talk a little bit about what is happiness, especially in the Catholic moral perspective. So read up on chapter 2 in Madison's book. If you need the text, email me and I will get it to you. Otherwise, we'll see you all on Friday. Have a good day.